England who takes Naltrexone for alcoholism. Now, we know that years gone by that people used to take 150 milligrams a day. Gary is promoting the use of LDN through the Sinclair Method, which is 50 milligrams a day. Thank you for joining me, Gary.
Thank you, Linda.
So could you tell us when drinking first started to be a problem for you?
I would have to say that it was back in the mid-90s. I should explain that I'm 41 now, and it was back in when I must have been my mid-20s. And I'd been someone who'd always liked to drink. And coming from Hartlepool, which is quite a hard drinking culture, it was very much the only thing to do on weekends or evenings here. But the problem which I had was that I had this situation where I was in quite a stressful job, and I was also suffering quite badly from insomnia. So I started to drink a couple of cans of Carlsberg Special Brew on an evening just to knock myself out, basically. Anyway, that wasn't so bad. I mean, it had a bit of a kick to it, but as the months went by, I started to notice something. My tolerance increased, meaning that I needed to knock back a third can and then a fourth can, and that's how it went. And eventually, it started to cause problems in my job. And I just thought to myself, right, okay, I need to knock this on the head now. And I had a bit of a problem, Linda, because I found I couldn't. God help me, even though it was, causing me the most horrific hangovers, and it had reached the point where I wasn't really getting much pleasure from it. I still couldn't stop it, and I couldn't quite explain why, but I seemed to have this craving. It was almost like this additional hunger had been grafted into my brain, and it was sometime after that I realised that I was indeed an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could say that things improved, obviously that situation changed, so I was away from that stress, but still the drinking continued, and it just seemed to get worse and worse over the years, until, just fast forwarding last year there, I reached crisis point, and things were not looking good for me.
Can you explain exactly what it was you were living like, what a typical week for you was like?
A typical week was an absolute nightmare. It was just a nightmare experience of hangovers, of some of the most horrific withdrawals which I used to get, and just this feeling of just being physically and mentally sick constantly, and just this horrible feeling of desperation.
Mm-hmm. And what was
rock bottom, really.
What was your doctor's advice?
My doctor's advice was just to stop drinking. That's what they would say to me. They would say, look, stop drinking or cut down. But the whole problem, the problem with people who have issues with alcohol, who have alcohol addiction, is that by definition they can't moderate, and they can't cut down. So I was a bit stuck, and I did try a lot of things. I gave AA a fair crack, and I tried things like rational recovery. I tried things like CBT, numerous different types of counselling and different types of talking therapies. And I even gave acupuncture a go, but again, it was all for nothing, it seemed. But in any case, there seemed to be a light at the end of the tunnel, because going back, must be about like 18 months to 2 years back, I started to read on different web forums about this thing called the Sinclair Method and Naltrexone. And when I first read this, I didn't quite believe it, to tell you the truth. Here they were saying was a treatment for alcohol addiction that had a near 80% success rate. And I just thought, wouldn't work for me. But, as I kept looking and I kept looking at different treatments, it still kept cropping up. And, I started to actually read different references to the clinical trials which had been done on this treatment. And there's something like 100 plus clinical trials on it now. And many of them are double-blind, placebo controlled trials, which, as you know, Linda, is the gold standard. And a lot of them were coming out with this same type of statistic, the 78%, 78 to 80% statistic. And anyway, what happened was I purchased a book through Amazon. It was called The Cure for Alcoholism by Dr. Roy Escapa, which is basically the Bible of TSM. That's the Sinclair Method, the acronym that we use for it. And I read it. I read it in about like one weekend. I just consumed it. And when I was looking on the internet, when I was looking on the Wikipedia page, I noticed that the Hollywood actress Claudia Christian was a big advocate of it. Claudia Christian, for anyone who doesn't know, is she's quite a popular figure in sci-fi circles with the TV program Babylon 5. So anyway, I contacted Claudia, and it was just in a moment of pain and desperation that I sent her this message on a Facebook fan page, and I was absolutely gobsmacked when she got straight back in touch with me that night and said to me, don't give up, look into this as a serious option for yourself. And then, it all went on from there.
Mm-hmm. And what's your experience been?
Well, it took a while to obtain the naltrexone that I needed privately. I mean, one of the biggest nightmares is actually trying to get hold of naltrexone in this country. But I eventually acquired it, and I started on the 2nd of April of this year. And what I just have to mention, just for the benefit of any listeners to your YouTube channel, is that this treatment is unique because it's not an abstinence-based treatment. It's not like, say, for instance, where you take the pill and you're told not to drink. It's not like that. What you've actually got to do, and this is what's unique about this treatment, is that you take the pill, you take 50 milligrams of naltrexone an hour before you start drinking. And then what happens is that over a period, I mean, it differs for quite a few people. I was actually quite a rapid responder. But, from a period of a few months typically up to about like 10, 11 months, what happens is a process of pharmacological extinction where, because you see, what happens is with most alcoholics is that when they drink alcohol, they get an abnormal level of endorphin reinforcement. And what naltrexone does is it actually blocks our natural opiates, which is our endorphins. And what happens is once it's actually blocked, and you actually consume the alcohol with the drug in your bloodstream at its optimal level after an hour, is rather than reinforcement, what happens is a process of extinction. So it's a decremental reduction. And it's not instant, I mean, like I say, I was a rapid responder, but it took about 3 months for me, and I went from being someone who typically drank well over 100 units of alcohol a week, just an inhuman amount of alcohol, to someone who gradually drank less and less. And it isn't like antabuse or any treatment like that where it causes you to reduce drinking because it causes drinking to become unpleasant. It's just that what happens is that the treatment actually works on the neural pathways, and it corrects the bad wiring, as it were. Mm-hmm. And what happens is it's more a process of becoming indifferent to alcohol. It's becoming de-addicted.
So how long have you now not been drinking?
Well, I had my first couple of glasses of wine after many, many months, just last week there.
Can I just stop you? You did
Sure.
say you started April this year.
I did. I did, absolutely, yeah. Or did I say April this year?
You did.
I meant last year. I do apologise.
Okay.
All right. I am a little bit nervous, Linda. I don't normally do radio or any sort of interviews.
Well, that's okay.
Like
it's
that.
Just that it's now only the end of April, so... Okay,
right.
So it's
yes,
April
yes, it's actually been a full year since I last started treatment.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. My mistake. Yeah, but what's wonderful about this treatment is that because it does actually cure a person, because it de-addicts them, you can choose to drink again if you want to, but that's the operative word, choose. Mm-hmm. And like I say, just last week there, I did celebrate my year's anniversary by having a couple of glasses of wine. But here's the thing. What you've got to do is, and this is crucial, you've got to take the medication an hour before you drink. It's a commitment, basically, with this treatment. You can become re-addicted if you do decide to go back out and drink again, but without taking the medication an hour beforehand, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. So it sort of acts like a prophylaxis in that respect. I mean, I just carry a couple of Nal pills in a key fob, which I actually carry around with me, which I find to always be handy. But what's wonderful is that because I've no longer got that craving, and because whenever I do drink, I've got the Naltrexone on hand to block the reinforcing effect, it means that I've got a control which I never had, this time going back in like 2012. I mean, back then, if I had, it didn't take much alcohol, put it that way, to get me to go out on a crazy bender, It would always be a case of one glass isn't enough. One glass is too much, and a million aren't enough. Once you're in the throes of the craving.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how long has the longest person been on this treatment without drinking? Do you know that?
Right. Well, Claudia's been on this treatment for the last 5 years, and I have come across a few people who've been on it for a few years, 3-4 years here and there. The book, The Cure for Alcoholism, did come out in 2008, So that's when that was actually published, and it's something that, you know, even though a lot of the theory and a lot of the research on this goes right back to the late 60s, it's actually not been heard about, and there's actually a reason for that. You know, the reason is that the you know, given the type of rehab industry which we've got at the moment, which is very much based upon abstinence and upon detoxing patients, you know, something like the Sinclair Method, which is cheap, you know, using a very cheap drug which you can prescribe to people so that they can, you know, take it in their own home, and where detoxification isn't necessary. I mean, if I'd have actually gone through conventional treatment, there's no doubt about it, Linda, I would have needed to have gone into hospital to have got a clinical detox. But with this treatment, because my drinking decrementally decreased, I didn't need a detox. So you know, it circumvented all of that. And, you know, if a treatment like this does, you know, become quite popular, then it has the potential, unfortunately, to put a lot of people out of jobs.
Getting back to when you started, though, what would you say your drinking pattern was like before you got to the stage of a year on and you'd stopped drinking?
It was getting crazy, to be honest with you. The blackouts were getting worse. You know, for many years I would go where, you know, I couldn't remember the events of certain evenings. Well, you know, it was getting to the point where I couldn't remember the last 2 or 3 days, and you know, I was getting the most horrible nausea and physical symptoms, which I'll be merciful and not spare you with, but quite technical. And also there were real problems with my LFTs, and also with blood pressure and cholesterol were starting to be a real problem. I was getting blood pressure readings of like 170 over 105, you know, which is borderline hypertensive crisis. So it was quite serious. I mean, a GP told me that I wouldn't make it to 50.
Yeah. So when you started, that was actually my question. When you started the Naltrexone, how did your drinking pattern change? How did, you know, the first day you took it, what was that like, and the second week, and so on?
It was quite fast. The reduction in drinking was quite fast for me. It was quite noticeable within a fortnight. It was in fact very fast. But when I was actually taking the drug itself, I wasn't consciously aware of much of any difference whatsoever. I mean, just for example, you know, the Carlsberg Special Brew didn't taste any different to me or anything like that. But then again, this treatment doesn't work on a conscious level. And, you know, the only real thing which I did notice quite early on was that when I was sitting with my alcohol in front of me, my drink, I would sometimes forget that it wasn't there. You know, strangely enough, I would get distracted by something on the TV, or someone would telephone me, or whatever, and I would wander off, and I would actually forget about the drink, and I would think, you know, I mean, I would realize later on, but that's quite a common occurrence for a lot of people who are on this treatment. They sort of lose the obsession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know.
So, how much alcohol were you drinking in that first week?
That first week alone, it was 45 units, so it was actually substantially lower than my normal weekly amount, which was around 100. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it just gradually decreased. I've actually graphed it. I actually kept some quite meticulous drink diaries, and I also did a graph on Excel, which I could actually send to you via email if you like.
That would be good. I can put it together with this interview. I can have it showing. That would be good. Okay, well that's very interesting. So with taking the naltrexone and the alcohol, did you find you had any hangovers in the morning?
No, nothing noticeably different. I was actually very lucky with regard to any side effects whatsoever. I found it to be a very benign drug. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, it's different from person to person. I mean, I've heard, just anecdotally, people complain of having some horrific side effects. But I would say, having researched this a little bit, I would suggest that perhaps those people are in the minority, because I think the worst it ever was for me was that I had stomach cramps one afternoon, and that was it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Gary. I'm sure it will be very inspirational for other people trying to give up alcohol.
You're very welcome, Linda. And I love your website and your YouTube page as well. I've just been enjoying having a look at that this evening. Well,
your interview will be there soon. Thank you.
All right then. Okay. Nice speaking to you, Linda.